just like an eerie feeling.
My eyes
Mandatory evacuation
are burning.
Stay inside. Idalia is throwing haymakers.
In 2023, the weather in America was...
I think the obvious word is crazy.
From Martian skies over Manhattan
I felt like it was like a Mad Max movie.
to Rocky Mountain High tornadoes,
It was one of those days I was like, scratching my head. Can we see a tornado out there in the Rocky Mountains?
we are weather detectives solving the biggest mysteries of the year, such as why flamingos ended up in Wisconsin.
How do these fragile little perfect-looking birds survive a trip thrown by a hurricane?
And what on earth causes St. Elmo's fire? And we're not talking about Rob Lowe.
If it relates anything to the lyrics of the song or the movie, it has something to do with an explosive kind of love.
Here are the top 10 weather mysteries of 2023.
Homes in Montana buried in tumbleweeds just yesterday.
If I were to wake up and suddenly my house is encased in tumbleweeds, I almost would be afraid to walk out the door.
I'd tell my son he's got a new chore to do. He had to go clean tumbleweeds off my house.
These poor people in the neighborhood, they've seen a couple of instances, but not a pile-on like this. I mean, this was a tumbleweed party.
I lived in a climate where we had tumbleweeds. I lived in southern Idaho.
They can make a mess on the roads. You're driving through, you get home and you find pieces of it all over the front of your car. It doesn't do any damage, but you have to go in there and pull it all out. It's not fun.
To blame, the powerful winds that blew those prickly beige brush through the Great Falls neighborhood.
Tumbleweed is not a good thing to eat, and that's for sure.
They look cool, right, from a distance, but if you go to touch them, they're prickly and they hurt.
When you get these bushes that dry out and then they just fall apart, they're not attached to a root anymore, you get a little bit of wind and they just easily blow all across the prairies.
They lose their roots to what's on the ground, and you get a major wind event, they all start to pile up, and there's only one thing stopping them, and that's really a city or a wall.
You'll need some magic powers to clean up that mess.
The winds that are howling across northern parts of Montana, picking these guys up and funneling them across right into this neighborhood.
Something people might not know about tumbleweeds, and something I really didn't know until 5 minutes ago, until I got Ian Oliver's notes here. It says it's an invasive species.
This is an especially invasive example of an invasive species. They can be a threat to travelers as these sometimes fly right across routes and interstates.
We should have tumbleweed alerts. We don't, but that's something new for the National Weather Service.
Reverse lightning is exactly what it sounds like. Lightning happening in the opposite direction by opposite processes.
The upward lightning is rare. It doesn't happen a lot.
But essentially what we're seeing is positive upward discharges of electricity trying to meet up with negative ions in the clouds.
It starts with a flash across the clouds, and then a big bolt, a return stroke comes flying up, and that's what zaps into the clouds.
I think it looks like a firework, and it truly is nature's firework. It just looks like you see the tail of a firework going up.
You get that flash that precedes it, which makes it a possibility with that reversal of charge.
It looks like you're building a monster. I mean, it's just sparking on up a couple of fingers out there. It's amazing.
There is a good chance to see this type of phenomenon in cities because you need a pointy top for all of the energy to go to that point and shoot up like a wand, if you will, like a magic wand.
As a reminder that when you're looking at lightning, it's looking for the easiest route. It doesn't matter if that easiest route is up or down, it's just trying to get itself grounded, and so that's why you always want to seek shelter during a lightning storm.
A possible tornado tore across Pikes Peak yesterday afternoon. Severe thunderstorms popped up in the region, showing possible rotation on radar.
It was one of those days I was like, scratching my head. Can we see a tornado out there in the Rocky Mountains? Sure enough, we did.
In this particular situation, maybe they were thinking a UFO had landed on Pikes Peak or something, but they went out to investigate it. They were able to prove this was a tornado.
You don't typically think of high elevation tornadoes. You think of Tornado Alley, you think of the plains, you think of the lower Mississippi Valley.
Well, first of all, it's important to know that a tornado can happen anywhere, anytime, as long as the conditions are right.
So one of the biggest misconceptions about tornadoes is, oh, it's too mountainous, too hilly, it's not going to form. That's baloney.
I think the misconception that tornadoes only form over flat land goes back to the old school Tornado Alley. That's purely thinking about tornadic supercells.
Look at the twigs that are kind of spread around right there. They're not really twigs. These things are big tree trunks.
This is perfect example, is they don't happen just on the plains. You can have hillsides and you can have mountains and you can have a tornado.
On a mountaintop is because the vortex has a really tough time staying together with a lack of moisture.
You know, the higher you go in elevation, typically, especially in the mountains, the less humidity, the less moisture content is in the air. And you need moisture content for a tornado usually, so it's really hard to get Gulf Coast moisture up into the mountains, and that's why they're so rare.
So they ended up rating this an EF1 tornado with maximum winds up over 100 miles per hour.
Tornadoes are the Earth's fastest storms. They're happening so fast and usually over narrow spaces that it's difficult to get instrumentation in place where the tornado might go.
This must have been a special storm survey for the National Weather Service.
You have to think about this event. It happened at 9,000 feet in a mountain, in a remote area. What is your precedent? What are you gauging this against?
It's that much more difficult in elevation because as the radar beam scans the sky from its point of origin, the mountain gets in the way.
What they're doing is they're looking at the damage. Are there trees down? Are there buildings in the area? This high up, probably not. But they want to look at the way that the trees are all scattered. Are they in one direction, like matchsticks or dominoes, which would indicate straight line winds? Or are they torn in all different directions, indicating some spin and some rotation?
A large debris field was spotted with downed trees on Pikes Peak Highway. This was just a few miles short of the summit.
What tornadoes do is they bounce on the ground. So it's, they'll stay on the ground for a while, go up, come back down, go up, come back down. So that's why tornado damage can really be haphazard. Sometimes a tornado will take out a whole street, right? Then one house will be left standing, and then the rest of the houses beyond that will be all torn up.
I'm quite familiar with Pikes Peak. My grandparents lived at the base of it, so I went there every single summer, loved it, and still, looking at this event, I scratch my head thinking about where I would visit each summer, looking up at the mountain and being like, how is that even possible?
And then check out this incredible video of a twister in the mountains of Montana. It's all playing out yesterday. Quite rare to see this, by the way, right above the snow-capped mountains.
So people thought that Montana got whacked with a tornado earlier this year. It wasn't. It was a landspout, which is a form of a tornado, but with a landspout, you don't need a supercell thunderstorm. You just need a regular thunderstorm with a twisting column of air. It also starts from the ground and moves up, as opposed to starting from the cloud and moving down, which is what a real tornado is.
Mother Nature, being a little mischievous that day, pulling a fast one on us with an optical illusion.
It was an optical illusion. It looked like the tornado was touching down on a mountaintop. So it was basically, yes, it was a funnel. It wasn't necessarily touching down on the top of the mountain. Instead, that was an optical illusion.
The landspout was actually in front of the mountains, but from where it was observed, it kind of looked like a tornado was right on the peak of a mountain, which would be super duper rare.
A landspout is technically a form of tornado. They're just typically much weaker and shorter lived.
Even though they're happening outside of a thunderstorm doesn't necessarily mean that it's safe to go near them.
Well, you should always guard your cattle. Those things are precious. So they can sometimes get a rating of an EF0. Sometimes they'll create winds of 90 mile per hour, but a tornado is by far more dangerous, more deadly, and we've got years and years and years of data to prove that.
But think about it. Not many people are up on the mountains all the time. So it could be happening in higher elevations. We're just not witnessing it. They can happen anywhere, anytime when conditions are right. Even in New York City, all 5 boroughs have had a tornado.
Are we seeing lightning from the top of volcano?
This is called a dirty thunderstorm.
Volcanoes are a lot like wildfires. They can create their own weather. And this particular volcano in Guatemala is at 12,000 feet, which is where very cold air lives.
So we've got this volcano that's blowing up. It's shooting all kinds of little miniature rocks and pieces of glass going in the air. That causes friction. That friction is static electricity. When it builds up big time, boom, you've got lightning.
This one looks like the ending of a world.
It looks like Thor is somehow in that volcano and he's charging his hammer right now.
So no, this is not lightning emerging out of the top of a volcano. It looked kind of like Mount Doom, like Frodo is going to throw the ring into it. This was not that, but it was certainly a wild set of circumstances, and it had this wild look to it.
I see a picture like that, I'm thinking, do I stand and watch it, or do I run like hell and get out of there?
Honestly think Tropical Cyclone Freddy could be an all-timer.
One tropical cyclone makes a record-shattering trek across the globe.
It was an ultra marathon. This was not a marathon. This was an ultra marathon. Are you kidding me?
And pilots bravely fly through the eye of a monster.
Big thunderstorms are going through, and when you're flying through that stuff, man, that is just rocking and rolling. That's a two-bagger of a flight. Forget it.
We go into the heart of Hurricane Lee on Weather Uncovered.
I'm Tom Nizzle with a Winter Storm HQ Minute. Let's talk about Blizzard Alley. Now everyone knows there's a tornado alley, but did you know there's a region in the U.S. called Blizzard Alley? It's located in the northern plains, and it's home to the most blizzards compared to anywhere else in the U.S. Now, certain areas in the Dakotas over to western Minnesota average at least one blizzard or more per year. Now, to be classified a blizzard, a storm must have winds of at least 35 miles an hour and a visibility of a quarter mile or less, and both of those must last at least 3 hours. Blizzard Alley is a breeding ground for these low-pressure systems to intensify as they punch eastward out of both the American and the Canadian Rockies. These systems are able to tap into readily available cold air that's typically in place behind them, and that causes the temperatures to plummet as a storm tracks through the plains. Fox Weather is your headquarters for all winter storm alerts. Download the Fox Weather app today.
There's some incredible video, by the way, to show you just into Fox Weather from the Hurricane Hunters. This is lightning within the eye of Hurricane Lee.
What you're looking at here with Hurricane Lee was when it was a Category 5. It was extremely powerful, big thunderstorms rotating around the middle part of it, that eye wall, and it's shooting up lightning.
Props to all of those hurricane hunters who go into these storms, because I'll tell you what, it is a bumpy flight just looking at it.
For the lightning to illuminate and you see the depth of what this eye wall looked like, 17 miles of clearing, is just incredible.
You're literally in the thick of it. What does that feel like?
Last night, there was no moon when we flew in, and so it was very dark flying in. We really only had the radar picture to guide us in, but then once we were in the eye of the storm, then it was mostly dark except for the repeated lightning.
Normally, the eye of a hurricane is clear.
So it might be the calm for just a moment if you're in the eye, but you know something bigger is coming right around the corner.
A tropical cyclone is essentially like a stack of pancakes or a stack of Jenga. You have the storms that stack up on top of each other. You get, the rising effect, and then you have the sinking down to the surface with an eye.
We knew it was going to be strong and further developing, but we didn't know that it was going to be a Cat 5, but that's what we found when we flew into it.
But just outside the eye is the eye wall, which is the most violent part of a hurricane.
I've been in an eye on the ground in the surface, and it's eerie, right? Because you hear the roar of the most powerful portion of this storm coming through, right? You have the eye wall and this massive wind event. You have whatever kind of damage, and then it gets eerily quiet.
Yeah, so the eye wall is the most violent part of the storm. You've got the strongest convection, the strongest thunderstorms right near the center of the storm, and then those outer bands fan out.
So this was an unusual situation to see a dirty eye where we saw thunderstorm activity collapsing part of the eye wall.
Real big thunderstorms are going through. And when you're flying through that stuff, man, that is just rocking and rolling. That's a 2-bagger of a flight, man. Forget it.
You can see almost this stadium effect. Like if you were at whatever team you root for, we go back to Lambeau Field, and you're right in the middle of field, right? Midfield, and you're looking out, and all the stadium, all those seats are actually thunderstorms. That's what it's like.
That's one of the sickest things you're gonna see flying through a hurricane is lightning illuminating the bowl of the eye itself. I mean, come on.
I imagine what being in the center of this eye, like the hurricane hunters were, almost felt like what Taylor Swift feels when she looks up from the center of her stage.
Take a look at this. It's a weather phenomenon that's called the St. Elmo's fire. This video was actually shot by U.S. Air Force pilots over Virginia while they were evacuating planes from Tampa's MacDill Air Force Base as Idalia approached.
St. Elmo's fire.
St. Elmo's Fire was a song in 1984. It was a movie in 1985.
It's a terrible 80s movie. It was, oh, you mean the actual phenomena.
St. Elmo's fire is a lot like one of those lightning lamps or a plasma ball that you would see if you were old school walking in the mall and you were going by Spencer Gifts or something like that.
St. Elmo's fire is excess friction in the clouds that are producing excess electrons.
You need an extremely charged atmosphere.
You need turbulent air, rising motion and sinking motion in close proximity, anything to create collision between particles and separate charge.
Perfectly safe to fly in. The only reason I started recording it was because I've never seen it that prominent before.
So what you're seeing here is you've got the metal points on the tip of the airplane's nose itself, and that is slicing through that highly charged atmosphere. It's separating protons and electrons.
Instead of electrons passing like a lightning strike, you're just getting a very quick spark.
We actually hear it before we see it. Kind of sounds like popcorn. We can hear it kind of over our radios as the static starts to pick up.
St. Elmo's fire got its name from sailors who named it after the Christian saint of sailors.
Back in the day, way back, early 1800s, ships sailing would start to see this glowing happening on the masthead, the very top of the ship, and that would be an indicator that a lightning strike was possible.
I think it was a love story of some sort. St. Elmo's Fire, well, if it relates anything to the lyrics of the song or the movie, it has something to do with love and is an explosive kind of love.
Cyclone Freddy, which formed back on February 6th, is likely to break the world record for the longest-lived tropical cyclone.
I honestly think Tropical Cyclone Freddy could be an all-timer. When you liken this to a sports record, this is Cal Ripken right here. This is the Iron Man.
It was an ultra marathon. This was not a marathon. This was an ultra marathon. Are you kidding me? 5,500 miles across the South Ocean, the Indian Ocean. It's been one of those treks that we've never seen before.
It's a remarkable longevity when you think about it, because it was starting to be monitored by our colleague from the Bureau of Meteorology in Australia on the 3rd of February.
The longevity on this guy. He forms north of Australia, drifts across the southern Indian Ocean, hits Madagascar, hits Africa, goes back out again. 5 weeks later, it finally disappeared. I mean, that's ridiculous.
It just kept going and going and going and going and going. It was like the Energizer Bunny out there.
The storm actually started developing off the coast of Australia, and it traveled more than 5,000 miles across the southern Indian Ocean. A beautiful display here on the map, but it actually has caused a lot of trouble as well. It lasted so long. It now has the title as the longest lasting tropical cyclone. And the thing about Freddy that was incredible, it did produce 168-mile winds, but it took over the title while transversing this huge ocean span.
I think what surprised me the most about that storm was just that it always found this environment to continue its lifespan.
Everything was in its favor. From no wind shear, which normally would tear it apart like cotton candy, that was not there.
The enhanced satellite there showing the circulation of a very powerful storm. Quite frankly, this one has been not a problem once, but a problem twice in some areas.
The conditions on this thing, it must have been perfect. You had warm sea surface temperatures, no shear, just a gradual shift on over, and this thing just developed into a category 5 essentially.
Very warm sea surface temperatures. That was the case around the globe this year. And of course, you had rich tropical moisture out over the Indian Ocean.
Cyclone Freddy has now tied the record for the longest lasting tropical cyclone on Earth.
We talk about the unprecedented warmth of the water temperatures, and this was for every major body of water in the entire world. So this wasn't exclusive to us here in the Atlantic, the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, the Pacific, but it was even issued and seen there in the Indian Ocean.
Number 2 is really the steering currents. They pretty much perfectly aligned east to west, so that allowed Freddy to really stay organized for a very long time.
Think about having a Cat 2 in the Gulf of Mexico from February 24th to March 8th.
I mean,
right?
The looming threat just offshore.
Boy, the similarity between Freddy and Dora are pretty extensive when you think about the longevity. You can track Dora's roots all the way back to the African coast, even though what we were talking about was in the Pacific Basin.
And warm ocean waters fueled Dora for, I believe, 9,000 miles. It was an incredible stretch.
I was wondering the size of Freddy, right? So I wanted to put into perspective, what we were anticipating. Freddy's about 200 miles across. And, from Mozambique to Madagascar is about 400 miles.
It's kind of funny, Hurricane Dora is almost a case study in the phenomenon known as nominative determinism. Dora became an explorer as it charged across the Pacific.
It'd be like taking a cross-country trip. Let's see, from coast to coast, it's about 2,500 miles. You'd be going back and forth from New York to LA 4 times in the span that Dora lasted.
There was some discussion that this might actually cross the international date line. At that point, it would have gotten a new name.
We are tracking the longest lived tropical cyclone on Earth when it comes to Freddy. It's made over a 5,000 mile journey across the southern Indian Ocean.
The interesting thing about Freddy and Dora is that they both robbed John. John used to be the hurricane with the top titles, the longest lasting, most powerful, all these kinds of things, but Freddy stole the title for longest lasting, and then Dora actually stole the title for a storm that crossed over the international date line. So John was kicked to second place because of that.
The thing that they both had in common was they were able to feed off of the extremely warm ocean water out there, and I think that goes to show that the ocean waters are warming up, and they're staying that way, and they're allowing for longer track storm systems.
This is a tropical cyclone that has lived over a month. It is incredible to see the stats here.
Will another storm challenge Freddy? It's tough to say because this is a unique event, right? It did go 34 days. It broke a record, and that's it's difficult. But for me, when I'm looking at this, I still think it's possible.
I don't know if that will be challenged, but it could be a close call. As we continue to see the waters get warmer.
Hey, look, if we see another Freddy, it's going to be across a big ocean. You're talking about the Pacific and the Indian Ocean, those areas, because that's where you're going to see little shear and warming temperatures. The Atlantic might be too small to get a 5-week-old storm. Let's hope so.
We're living in times where water temperatures are warmer than they've ever been. We have an environment that is ever changing, and I think that especially coming off of this year, the number of storms that rapidly intensified, the number of storms that developed when we didn't think they would, there's always going to be that storm that's going to challenge a record.
These lakes are ghosting faster than your last situationship.
Yeah, what's a ghost lake, right? Are you gonna find Casper the Ghost hanging out there? Is this like a haunted space?
Lakes are coming back from the dead all over the West.
When you think about it, it's like an oasis out there, what you're looking at from a distance, because you're like, wait, that's not a lake, is it? That used to be desert. Yeah, that's a lake.
That's ahead when Weather Uncovered 2023 returns.
I'm Tom Nizzle with a Winter Storm HQ Minute. Is winter weather worse than severe weather? Well, they may not necessarily be worse, but winter storms are a completely different beast. Now, it's common knowledge that most forms of severe weather, including tornadoes, hurricanes, and flash floods, often produce catastrophic property damage in their wake. Now, winter storms don't necessarily produce property damage. They do, however, cause extensive travel issues, both on the ground and in the air, but they also can cause injuries and fatalities. Now, most deaths from winter storms are not directly related to the storm itself. People die in traffic accidents on icy roads. They die of heart attacks while shoveling snow. They die from hypothermia from prolonged exposure to the cold. Everyone is potentially at risk during winter storms. So download your Fox Weather app today.
What this is still producing clearly is torrential rain and directly over Interstate 95. We've got that flash flood warning that continues as that storm system slowly moves off to the northwest, 15 miles per hour.
Man, when I saw these thunderstorms start training over the same spot time after time after time, dropping tons of rain on Fort Lauderdale, that's just tough.
What happened in the Fort Lauderdale area was staggering. We consider it to be a 1 in 1,000 year flood, not meaning that this happens once every 1,000 years, but in a probability standpoint, it means in any given year, there's a 1 in 1,000 chance of it happening. That's 0.1%. to get a heavy rain rate occurring over the same spot.
Waist deep water is what we're talking about. Look at it.
It was more than 25 inches of rain in 12 hours, so all the statistics are off the charts. It was historical. Fort Lauderdale's mayor came out and declared state of emergency for the entire city. Broward County was busted.
What shocked me most about the flooding is the fact that in Fort Lauderdale, we weren't even in the hurricane season. I mean, this was in April, right? And so you're thinking, okay, if you're gonna have a record-setting event, if the airport's gonna turn into a lake, it's gotta be attributed to a tropical system. Wasn't the case.
Nearly 7 inches of rain. That's incredible to get.
As a meteorologist, watching this setup around South Florida, you got this upper level low peeling out of the Gulf of Mexico, a warm front coming up from the south. It was humid. Humid air can hold more water, and it was thunderstorm after thunderstorm training across the region.
What was unusual about it is that the amount of tropical moisture that was allowed to feed inland was just like a wet towel in the summertime. If you go to the pool, you dip a towel in the pool and you start to wring it out, that's how the atmosphere was being wrung out.
It is just the constant, incredibly heavy rainfall that's lifting here to the north.
I think for a storm to have stalled out in the manner in which it did, and for it to tap into its unlimited supply of moisture and bring such heavy rain was astonishing.
So the forecast the day before this, there was an indication there was going to be rain. That much rain was a surprise.
We know just over 25 inches of rain was captured in a weather sim station near the airport.
It was interesting because, yes, we had the severe weather alerts. There were some tornadoes confirmed in the area. That thankfully got a lot of people's attention. But when we noticed the rain rates, 4 or 5 inches per hour with some of these tropical downpours, and then saw that the storms weren't moving for several hours, you do the math, and that adds up to a bad situation very quickly.
Well, for one, when the flash flood emergency is issued, that's when you know you have to take this seriously. But the water was everywhere with just nowhere to go. It just kept coming.
Oh, the radar was lit up. I mean, you could just see the rainfall rates were ridiculous.
It was very wet leading up to that day. And I remember things were already pretty saturated before the rain got going on April 12th.
A flash flood emergency in Fort Lauderdale. It brought water so deep cars were floating in places. That's the top of a car.
But when you have that urban landscape, all of that water coming in, you look at those visuals, there's just nowhere for it to go. It's trapped. And that's when you knew there was concern, because the mechanism and what's driving this wasn't leaving anytime soon.
You're dropping almost 2 feet of rain and more in some spots in a short period of time. Where's that water going to go? It's going to go up the streets in those clogged drains. Man, you cannot drive through that crap.
Now, on America's Weather Center, a 1 in 1,000 year flood soaking South Florida.
Most hurricanes don't even produce that much rain.
Video that I vividly remember of a truck driving through essentially floodwater, and I go, oh my gosh, is that on the airport tarmac? At that moment, I knew that whole area was in trouble.
Unfortunately, a lot of folks are now stranded at the airport. They have nowhere to go.
The airport was a crazy story because not only did you have the lobby flooding, you had all these places, the runways themselves were no longer a place where airplanes could go. Instead, they looked like huge lakes.
And planes couldn't land. then you're like, this is a major problem.
Life-threatening flooding has been occurring. We've seen streets, roads that have taken on a lot of water.
I think the most striking images for me was people coming out of the airport, you know, wading through their luggage with inches of water around them. Also, too, just watching people walk through the streets. You know, I think any flooding images will catch your eye when you have somebody who normally would walk down the road, you know, to get to the dining district or to cross the street, you know, at a light, and they're waist deep in water.
At the same time, you have Floridians that are embracing it. You have them on skimboards getting towed by, you know, golf carts skimming through the water. You have people that are kayaking because they typically use that out into the intercoastal or into the ocean. So just really embracing what the weather was like and still enjoying it, even though this was a record event.
And this person even swimming in the street in Fort Lauderdale.
No city is built to withstand rain like we saw there in Fort Lauderdale. There's really not much that can be done. If anywhere could handle it, it's Florida. It's a giant sandbar.
I would not want to see 25 inches of rainfall in New York City or Boston or Philly or any place like that. Any major I-95 corridor city to get that much of rainfall would be catastrophic.
Just an overall exhausting, brutal night for South Florida.
I think for Floridians, what they probably overlook is the danger, right? For me, I actually growing up in Wellington, so we're about 30 minutes inland, I slept outside during tropical systems. I begged my parents to sleep out on the patio because I love the sound of wind rustling through the palm trees. I never thought, okay, that could fall.
You can't count Floridians out. They've seen it all. If they're not taking on gators in their front lawn, they're taking on hurricanes, or in this case, big time floodwater.
One of the hottest, driest places on Earth, Death Valley, has a lake emerging.
Yeah, what's a ghost lake, right? Are you gonna find Casper the Ghost hanging out there? Is this like a haunted space?
The coolest thing about the lakes in Death Valley is you don't want to drink it because you could instantly die. Not instantly.
A ghost lake is a lake that was either once there and has dried up or has come back to life. In this instant, it's a lake in a place that we don't expect it to be.
Normally, I would be in the middle of farm fields, but as you can see, I'm in the midst of a vast lake. The road behind me disappearing into the water. It's a surreal scene that was triggered by the atmospheric rivers we saw hit California earlier on in the year, and it's been fed by a heavy snowpack in the Sierra.
The Ghost Lake, which reappeared magically in 2023, is the Tulare Lake. And at one point, the Tulare Lake was actually the largest lake west of the Mississippi. It's hard to imagine this because the lake, it got to be so big in the 1800s that it became famous, right?
This reappeared for the first time in a long time. And this is really the reason why, was because they had created dams in order to help the agricultural community in the Central Valleys in California. And in order to have enough water there, because there was always a water crisis, they had to drain Tulare Lake.
The lake in Badwater Basin, though, has stuck around far longer than the others.
And when people start planting their crops on there thinking it's not going to be a lake again, sometimes it can be mistaken, like we had earlier this year. Atmospheric river after atmospheric river pounding into California.
It becomes a ghost because in a lot of ways it's human interaction with that land. We drain the water because we want to use it for something.
The fact that a lake could reappear, a lake that had been gone for 100 years is now filled back up, that says a lot about the moisture and the storms that came into the west.
All that rain had to go somewhere, and a lot of it ended up in Badwater Basin.
Well, I think the fact that we're getting these ephemeral lakes to pop up says that the West had a very healthy year of snow and snowpack the winter before.
The old adage is always drought ends in flood. You need extreme rain events to make up these giant deficits that land you in a big or a long-lived drought.
It just shows that when you have a ghost lake like Tulare Lake or what's happening in Death Valley, that massive weather events can shift so much of the local ecosystem.
Now, the reason that it's here, well, it's all because of the remnants of Hurricane Hillary that blew through here on August 20th, and it dropped about 2.2 inches of rain.
Our average rainfall in an entire year is less than 2.2 inches of rain.
These lakes have popped up in Death Valley, which is named that for a reason. It's one of the hottest, driest places, not just in America, but in the world.
Death Valley is just that, nothing. It's basically flat. I've driven through there many times. I'm like, please don't break down car now.
I think that Death Valley represents the most extreme situations of weather. The hot, the dry.
We came here for Fox weather on a day where the temperatures were hovering around 123 degrees. When we were here last, our equipment was shutting down. Things were just going sideways.
You always hear about Death Valley being one of the least hospitable places in the entire world when we're talking about extreme heat and the dryness. To see an actual lake in a place like that, at some point it was deeper than 2 feet, must be wild to see. We know it's probably could be once in a lifetime.
Kind of eerie when you think about it. It's like an oasis out there, which you're looking at from a distance, because you're like, wait, that's not a lake, is it? That used to be desert. Yeah, that's a lake. It's crazy.
And what I love is how people embrace it. They look at it and they're like, wow, this is like if I went to Mars and it had water on it, this is what it would look like.
We got this feeling to be in another planet.
I know that's a very rare thing, so I figured it's a good time to get some pictures here.
One of the coolest things about the lakes in Death Valley, once they finally dry up, it leaves salt. So borax was a big product back in the turn of the century, last century, and I need some more borax, so I'm gonna go out there probably when it dries up next month.
So just the simple fleeting moment of them, I think, is the coolest part about an ephemeral lake.
We have massive changes in climate that can bring about huge change, and sometimes it goes back and forth. So once something changes in one direction, that does not mean it's gonna be like that forever. It can always come back as a ghost.
The weather in 2023, in one word, it would be wild.
It's the #1 weather mystery on our list.
All right, is this it? Am I calling into work? Am I done for today?
Maybe in a decade of New York City forecasting, I would mention once a year.
I remember giving these live reports and trying to tell everybody, hey, it's not good. I started coughing a little bit. My eyes were watering.
Now what took our top spot when Weather Uncovered 2023 returns.
We could phase into a strong El Nino.
This Arctic blast now threatening the Northeast with bitter cold temperatures.
We're talking about 80 inches of snow in some areas.
There's a snow emergency that has been declared here in the city of Minneapolis. Essentially what that means.
This nor'easter is angry. We are definitely in the beginning of what is blizzard conditions.
You know, I talked to one guy who said that he was actually wearing shorts this weekend, and then, boom.
If you pick this up, it's light on the top.
Bone-chilling cold to sketchy snow.
El Nino is in place heading into winter for the first time in 4 years.
Some places under a blizzard warning.
On our way up to the hills and up to the mountains, we're actually seeing more snow.
Moving off to the south, and boy, is that taken over across the country for so many.
Snow on the ground being blown around by these strong winds.
Hi, I'm Britta Merwin, and today we are talking about snow squalls.
Winter storm warnings will be prevalent across the northern high plains.
Winds coming off Lake Erie will be coming across the south. We've been dealing with intense snowfall rates.
To be a more light, fluffy sort of snow.
Fox weather, snow angel.
Here we go. Guys, I'm gonna toss it back to you.
A thick haze extends, is actually visible from Canada south across the American border to New York City. In fact, the Big Apple had the worst air quality in the world at one point. Last night, the reading went to 196. That's the worst air quality IQ on the planet.
When the orange haze and smoke came to New York City, I was reporting live. We can really feel this smoke, especially over this past hour when it was thickest.
The sky started to get that eerie red hue. It had a similar effect to what Saharan dust does down in Florida.
The thing that was insane about this event is that every single person was talking about it. You couldn't escape a conversation about what was happening in the atmosphere.
I was surprised
to see how many runners were coming through Times Square early this morning, because this isn't like heat. Any time of the day is dangerous to be out here.
So that morning we went out with my crew to get out to Times Square. We were reporting and hosting live with Fox Weather First. And all morning long we had been tracking this plume of smoke that was drifting towards Manhattan.
You can see it and you smell it, but talking about unhealthy to be outside, that's a message that you want to make sure everybody certainly gets.
How ominous it felt with how many buildings there are. It's something to be said that when everything turns orange and you try to look 2 to 3 blocks down and you can't see something, but you know there's this massive 40, 50-story skyscraper there, yet you just can't see it, or you're trying to look over the river and all you see is a bridge go halfway through and then it ends. You're thinking, all right, is this it? Am I calling into work? Am I done for today? And then you realize, no, I'm the one who's got to talk about all this.
People were out and about. You know, this is a big city. Millions of people were out, and that smoke came on quickly.
We have seen a lot of people wearing face masks throughout the day.
Seeing it on satellite and experiencing it in real time was striking to me. It was suddenly this darkness started to come over Manhattan. Your heart began to race a little bit.
And I remember giving these live reports and trying to tell everybody, hey, it's not good. I started coughing a little bit. My eyes were watering, they were itching. And yeah, after a while, I remember starting to feel a little bit lightheaded. And I gotta tell you guys, I've been out here a few hours. I think we got out here at around 4 o'clock. My eyes are burning.
Maybe in a decade of New York City forecasting, I would mention once a year the AQI, Air Quality Index. And it was only because sensitive groups were going to be impacted by it. This was an air quality index issue that was impacting every single person.
Like, how do you smell wildfires in Canada?
You can see from the higher vantage points really how thick this smoke has been all day.
The smoke was so dense, and because you had this weather pattern that set up, you had these northerly winds that came out of Canada, it drew everything down to the surface.
They have got a code red alert here. They're asking folks to stay inside.
The sky turned this orange color. That's why people kept making the Mars reference.
I felt like it was like a Mad Max movie.
Visibility was so low, it caused that airports to actually ground flights for a little bit.
I've seen this before because I've covered wildfires in California. The reason the sky looked like that is basically you think about particles in the air, and the sunlight will refract the particles in the atmosphere. So when you think about larger particles, it tends to get rid of the blues in the sky.
What we're experiencing, it can find any nook or cranny, any crack that you have, and it kind of just fills into your home. You need a big wind event to just clear it out. It's almost like a vacuum or something like an air blower that could blow it all out, and then you get your air quality clean. That just wasn't the case. It was stagnant, it was quiet, and allowed that smoke to settle in to the big city.
When this Category 3 storm made landfall in Florida, we know it caused billions of dollars in damages. It turned so many worlds upside down completely in the Big Bend. And apparently, some of the residents have even flown the coop. Florida's famous flamingos are actually turning up where they don't belong. This is one of the stories that's evolved out of Idalia. Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, all states that are claiming that they've had flamingo sightings.
Well, clearly, flamingos ended up in Wisconsin because they wanted some beer and cheese curds. Obviously, they got tired of shrimp.
How did flamingos end up in Wisconsin? It's easy. Hurricane Idalia picks them up and begins to push them on through. And I can imagine they found 5 of them in Wisconsin. They're like, are we here yet? Are we there yet?
They behave a lot like people behave when a disaster is heading in their direction. They get out of the way.
Massive weather event. They got picked up with the winds and carried north.
So it's not that uncommon for weather to actually displace species. This has happened in the past where we've seen bird migration be displaced because of tropical systems or even sometimes, bigger storms that can develop.
How is it that the storms displace the birds? Are they caught up in it or do they flee it?
In this case, they were probably caught up in it. It's not uncommon for birds to get trapped within a hurricane, and frequently you can actually see them on radar.
It's just like an airplane. An airplane doesn't want to go through a storm. A flamingo doesn't want to go through a storm, so they have to go around the storm. They get redirected. Navigation's like recalculating, and boom, you end up in Wisconsin.
How do these fragile little perfect looking birds, survive a trip thrown by a hurricane into the upper Midwest?
I feel so bad for those flamingos. Yeah, they're not going to be next to the food source they like, which is shrimp, which gives them their colors. They might be turning yellow with the cheese out there.
By the way, 5 flamingos, a group of flamingos, it's a flamboyance.
No way they're rooting for the Packers. That's just, there are some lines you don't cross.
Amy says nobody roots for the Green Bay Packers. Find that tough to believe. I'm just curious on who is Freeze rooting for. You going for the Bears? You have no one? Or Kansas City? Are you a bandwagon fan now because of Mahomes? Nah, Green Bay Packers, they got plenty of fans. And now I think the Flamingos would be a great kind of addition to that fan base.
Do I think flamingos would cheer for the Green Bay Packers? No, because I don't think they would be able to fit cheese heads on their tiny little bird heads.
I don't know if they love the Packers. Maybe they're there for cheese, beer. They have a lot of great everything. But yeah, flamingos in Wisconsin was a little odd.
If I had to pick one word to describe the weather in 2023.
If I had to describe the weather in 2023 in one word.
One word, right?
2023 weather in one word.
The weather for 2023.
The weather in 2023 in one word, it would be wild.
What is a good synonym for craptacular?
Well, I think the obvious word is crazy.
Wacky. Why? Because nothing was what it seemed.
We had so many weeks of severe weather outbreaks. We had a pretty healthy, very active hurricane season.
Extreme. We had so many extremes, from extreme heat to extreme snowpack to extreme rain. The severe weather outbreaks were extreme. You had people whose lives were ripped apart because of the power of these storms.
Unpredictable because so many historic events have happened this year. And I believe there's going to be some changes because of what we talked about, the overall guiding mechanism from La Nina to El Nino. Certain areas are feeling those impacts for the first time in a long time.
The reason I'm going to go with wicked is because it was wicked in some ways because it did damage, it was destructive, it was awful. It's terrible for so many people to have extremes with weather and natural disaster.
We came off of what was supposed to be a dry year for the southern tier, specifically California. They got slammed.
We saw a little bit of everything in an El Nino year where we expected the hurricane season to be below average. It wasn't. It was well above average. We had a lot of severe weather. Early in the year, we had heat waves, and in some places, one of the warmest years on record.
A weather pattern that was so unprecedented and not what you would think should be happening based on what we were predicting.
The other meaning of wicked is impressive or in awe. And I think that the weather of 2023 also represents a lot of awe, the spectacular power of Mother Nature. And so, yeah, it could be wicked in a good way and wicked in a bad way.
It would be quizzical. Oh, what the heck? If the censors don't like craptacular, which they should.
We are definitely in the beginning of blizzard conditions.
Bone-chilling cold to sketchy snow.
When it's cold outside, Fox Weather turns up the heat.
What a storm!
Fox Weather is Winter Storm HQ.